Hi, welcome to Building Solid Foundations. I'm your host, Steve Matley. We are on KCAA 1050 AM and 106.5 FM all over Southern California. If you missed the live show, you can always catch us on the podcast. Probably your favorite platform. We're on a bunch of them. Or you can always catch us on the Building Solid Foundations channel. That's a free channel available on Roku, Amazon Fire, or the Android app. Sorry, Apple people, they don't play nice with other children. That'll be a little later. So we were available if you miss us. Also, there's a lot of great shows in the archive, a lot of great guests. Today, we're going to be talking real estate. I know that's a surprise because we do so little of that. I think 70% of our shows are about real estate or construction or development. We're talking real estate where we're going to hone in on Arizona. Phoenix is the fastest growing city in the country and has been for a long time. It doesn't seem to be slowing down at all, as you know from all your neighbors from California that moved out there. So we're going to talk with the Government Affairs Director of We Serve, which is the Association of Realtors. So Liz Recchia, she comes from an entrepreneurial background. She started by doing fixers and fixing and reselling along with her husband. She's experienced real estate as an investor, renter, homeowner, business owner, broker, local real estate association government affairs director, as I mentioned, and has helped owners of distressed real estate, including REO short sales, probates, as well as owners of small commercial real estate developments and residential properties. By the way, she's a book out on that too. We'll talk about that in a second and have her mention the book that she wrote just for people who are having trouble making their mortgages. She has a knack for simplifying the complex to help leaders and decision makers ascertain prudent policy for themselves, their organizations, and to impact and influence policy in their industry. Welcome, Liz, to Building Solid Foundations.
Thank you.
All right. So, just for full disclosure, there is a relationship between us. Liz is my older sister, and she still tries to tell me what to do sometimes. But actually,
Absolutely.
we work on we've worked on projects together in the past. We're not partnered on anything, but she has brought investors to my project, and I have referred people to her. And right now, she is helping us on a project that we're doing in Southeast Phoenix Metro as well, helping us with the city and some of the governments down there. So, Liz, you have a tagline. Well, first of all, you also run a real estate school. You teach people this stuff.
I
You
do.
have a real estate school. We sell real estate. You can contact Liz, by the way, at lr@lizrecchia.com if you want to give her an email and connect with her, or lizrecchia.com. Um, your tagline is using the art of civility and simple gestures to discuss, impact, and influence prudent policy. That's a mouthful. Sounds like something one of the founding fathers would have written. Where does that come from? What does that mean?
Well, because I do read a lot of the founding fathers, as you know, and we in our family were steeped in a lot of history and have lots of books, and I've carried that on in my own adult life. And part of it is as both a broker um, of a real estate brokerage, and then also now that I'm a government affairs director, over the years, there has been a decline in people stopping and thinking before they speak. And a lot of times they assume negative consequences when they have no foundation to know that there's a negative consequence, and they can't even articulate what they're objecting to, whether it is a multifamily housing complex, whether it's someone who's going to convert their current premises to a short-term rental, even for like a Super Bowl event or something like that, let alone a long-term investment. People have a knee-jerk reaction. And increasingly, you see little snippets, and it's certainly on social media, but it is also on the major media as well, emphasizing the negative of something, and they're little sound bites, and people react instantly. And frequently, when you can speak with them to the side, take a deep breath, and just say, tell me what you're concerned about, they either cannot articulate it or they completely misunderstand the arena they're in. So part of this is trying to say in public policy, rather than everybody becoming fractured and upset at the outset, how about if we all sit down and speak with each other as if we would like to have a polite conversation, and we would really like to know what is the circumstances, and all discuss ramifications, positive and negative, before we just run off the road and cause great disturbance. I am distressed by the number of really good projects that a large number of people were in favor of. And we know they were in favor of because they voted for the local city plan. And now when the city goes to implement it and someone has an idea of how to implement it with a particular product, there are a few people who get very, very loud and headlines run with the negative, but no one ever sits down and says, wait a minute, that city plan calls for that type of development in that area. The voters voted on it. What does it mean for the community at large, whether it is a financial consequence or a community growth consequence in our codes and zoning? Do we need to amend something? Rather than having the conversations like that and saying, is this product a good fit in this location? Or is there another location better? Or is this a great product for this location? You have a lot of just emotional reaction. And frequently what I see after that is within weeks and sometimes a couple of months, the larger population, I will start receiving phone calls or inquiries saying, why can't we have that thing we heard about? Whether it's a truck stop or a gas station, or it's a multifamily housing or single family detached housing, purchase or rent. It's just one of those things where you're seeing that type of reaction. And because there's no conversation, people don't really understand. We have projects that are absolutely something that when you talk to someone outside of that particular objective at that moment in time, they'll say, yes, we need that grocery store. We need those apartment units for our entry-level housing people. We need that facility that is a recreation facility, or it's a cultural museum type of facility, or it's a library, or it's some other thing that people want. But you get them into a particular project, and if the headlines have gone out ahead of time and there's a few people who've said knee jerk, we don't want it, then everyone's very fractured on it, when really the conversation should be something different, completely different. So my tagline is trying to say, let's talk about what this is in a civilized manner, and then use a little bit of reason and common sense and acknowledge where in that particular community's already voted on zoning and code of ordinances and city plan, where does this fit and how does it help long-term with an eye towards the future?
Okay, so I see a lot of that. Now, I'm wondering if that's increased in Arizona because of the increase in Californians moving to Arizona. And the reason I say that is, as a Californian, I find that to be the predominant sport in California is emotional reactions, protests, and having absolutely no clue of what we're protesting about. And I say that to all my friends and neighbors in California, let's stop that. So we've been importing those people into Phoenix and other areas. Is that part of the problem, or is it the general population at large? Because we also know that we've been trained through the mass media that everything's about a clickbait headline, everything has to be catastrophe, everything has to be emotional, because we have to get the clicks, because we have to sell the airtime, because we have to keep people glued to our podcast and our television broadcast and our radio broadcast. And good news and positivity doesn't sell, honestly. Fear mongering and emotional turmoil keeps people engaged. Fear-based engagement. Which of those you think is probably more likely, or is there a combination thereof?
Can I say a combination and then none of the above as well? So,
okay.
A combination, yes, you have people coming in, and yes, you're right. Certainly California has been doing this for a very long time, where it's a knee-jerk reaction to something, but they, on the other side of the fence, they want it very much. So that's been going on for a very long time, and they come here and they bring that athleticism with them as well. But then you also have people who have been here for a very long time in some of these areas, sometimes 3 or 4 generations, and they're in conflict with themselves. I want this grocery store. My children need these jobs, but I don't want anything to change. So that's a very human emotion and
So people
understandable.
moved to a place that was quieter, it was low key, it was less traffic, and they like it, but they're also tired of driving 35 minutes to go to the grocery store.
Right. And in some cases, you're talking about people whose families have owned that land for 100, 120 years.
Okay.
So this is where, and they understand things are changing. They just don't want to change it right there in their place. So you have that. But I will say it's not even, those aren't the major 2 things. Those are very emotional. The most problem I see is we have a large number of people, I'd say at least 2, possibly 3 generations, who have not been taught the basics of how our society was designed to function. So if I am in a city and they don't understand their local government, whether it's county or city, they certainly don't understand their state or their federal. But for me, I'm here in Arizona at the local level. So although people vote for a city council and vote for county board of supervisors and vote for a mayor, they don't really understand how that system functions. So they go to the polls and vote on a city plan that usually takes a city at least 18 months to 2 years to go through the process of here's what we think citizens want and getting stakeholder input and having public meetings. And then they get to a point where they think they've got everything they need. They go to the ballot, the voters approve it, but the voters never paid attention in really great detail about what that meant. And they don't think in the future. So they don't know the system they're in. They don't know how they participate. All they can think about is screaming when really there's a process for them to, whether the city plan has been approved or not, to lodge their concerns in an intelligent manner. They don't know where to find basic information, and then they don't think long term. So I will tell you, one of the biggest concerns I have is we have 303 that was built from the Loop 17 in North Phoenix. It curves around, comes through North Peoria, comes through North Surprise, comes through the west side of Glendale and Goodyear, and then hooks back up with I-10. Right now, there is no place for a truck driver to stop. There's no truck stops anywhere along that. At one point, about 18 months ago, Glendale was looking at putting in a really large, and this is all rural at the time. There's lots of farms out there, putting in a large truck stop near the on the Glendale side of the 303. And it was going to be more than just a truck stop. It was going to have not just the truck stops as you think about it, that would have hotel accommodations. It would also have a sheriff's substation. And a few people about 4 or 5 miles west of where it was going to go didn't want that. And their whole big thing was it will bring crime. Okay, there's a sheriff's substation as part of this. Yeah. So I doubt if it's going to bring more crime. But if you think it is, and let's have a conversation about how the sheriff may not be manning it correctly. I mean, it's a different conversation. Then it'll become just a crime bed. Well, a few people were very loud about it. Most of the people in the area didn't notice. And I kid you not, once the city council said there's too much discord, we're not going to go forward with this. So they just decided not to move forward with the project. Within 2 weeks, I was presenting to brokerages and to other organizations, and every single time for about 2 weeks, I would have people who lived in that community that was 5 miles away say, when are we going to get something like a gas station? We have to go all the way up to North Surprise, or we have to go all the way down south of 10 in Goodyear to get a gallon of gas. And I said, well, that project was killed because there were 4 people who were very, very upset, and no one else said, what about? The trucking industry came through, and I didn't see them make the claim that, and it was true. And the biggest concern is if you're a truck driver, once you leave the area that you would take off to Prescott, so the Prescott area coming down 17, once you leave that, there's not another truck stop that you can go to until you get out to Buckeye. Okay. So from a practical matter, is that really appropriate? I mean, do you want your stuff? And do you want the person who's bringing your stuff to be able to have the ability to get food and comfort facilities and fuel? Wouldn't that be great? I mean, so there's no common sense because the people are not thinking through this. And there was no earthly reason I could see why that location wasn't a great location. And other than that, it was farms. Now it'll be some kind of commercial facility. Right. So still commercial because it was always.
They might get a gas station, but they're not going to have the truck stop solution there, and that's going to affect the logistics.
And they may not even get a gas station because everyone looked and said, "Oh my, you really don't want something like that." They may get another warehouse instead. That's true. Okay. So, all right, so that's one of those things.
So, and I see that a lot. What I see is the general public tends to be disengaged and completely apathetic during the process, planning, and all the time all the public hearings are happening. And then a small group of emotionally reactive people get involved in implementation who never showed up during the planning and put their 2 cents in. After everything's been approved and done, then they show up when something's getting ready to go and start complaining about it. I do see that a lot in the work that we do. All right, we're going to take a short break. When we come back, we're going to get into how we engage with local governments to address these things and get involved. This is Building Solid Foundations. Our guest today is Liz Recchia. She is the Government Affairs Director for We Serve, which is the Association of Realtors in basically all of the heavily populated area of Arizona, Southern Arizona. We'll be right back after the short break.
Tired of qualifying your leads and not getting the right clients for you? Join the finest women in real estate and learn how to attract the best clients and increase your referral network. Call now at 951 378 5316. 951 378 5316 and become one of the finest women in real estate.
Real Men of Real Estate.
Men of Real Estate radio show here on KCAA.
Boats, mortgages can be purchased.
All of us want to live in thriving communities.
Basically, go to the radio station, KCAAradio.com.
You're listening to Fabulous Lifestyle Radio. I'm your host, Ricky Perry, and we are affiliated with CNBC, NBC News, and Sports, where we broadcast to over 5 million households in the greater Los Angeles area. If you missed our previous shows, you can watch us on our streaming networks on Roku TV, Amazon Fire Stick, and the Android app.
Welcome back to Building Solid Foundations. This is Steve Matley, your host. I'm talking today with Liz Recchia. She is the Government Affairs Director of We Serve, which is the association of realtors that serves the fifth largest association actually in the country. 2,600 members. They cover West Maricopa County, Southeast Maricopa County, Pinal, Cochise, Santa Cruz. So basically, everywhere where the heavy population is in Arizona, and the fastest growing area in the country, that is the area that they cover. When we left off before we do that, by the way, I mentioned a book earlier, and I want to go back to that. For people that are struggling with how they keep their mortgage payments up or have any unexpected bumps in the road financially, you wrote a book to help people not become distressed property owners. And I know it was a while back, but it's still very much relevant because honestly, it's a basic book on how to manage your personal finances. So tell us about that and where we get it.
Oh, thank you. The name of the book is Help, I Can't Make My House Payment. And at the time I wrote that, I was in my 20th year of working with distressed homeowners. So it came from people saying to me when I met them, can you help, I can't make my house payment. Can you help me here? So that's the basis of the book. And what I do is take the system and the process that is described in that system is still in force today. It came out of the Dodd-Frank Act. So all of the documents I talk about, if you become a distressed homeowner, are all still there. And the philosophy is, if you find yourself in a difficult position, you need to, once again, take a deep breath and actually assess the situation. Do you actually need to do a short sale, a loan mod, or go REO? Or do the circumstances that are around you, everyone else is panicking, and if you take a deep breath and assess your own financial position, you may not need to do any of those. You may need to just be a little better at crafting what you spend in relationship to what you earn, or finding a way to get additional income. So the first part is talking about the process and building your own team, because the lender and the government have their own team of people. So who do you need on your side to help you? And then we go through what a loan mod and a short sale and REO are, and how you negotiate those systems and processes and what to expect. And then the third part is, okay, let's get a grip on your personal finances. Here's how you make a budget. Here's your considerations, and here's how you plan for the future. And the budget's your tool to do all that.
So if any of you out there, and I highly recommend this book if you haven't read it before, you want to rethink one of the things they didn't teach in school. There's a book called The Millionaire Next Door. It's very well known. He tells you to do this, but he doesn't tell you how. This book will tell you how. This book will tell you how these people on very modest incomes built up I would say, robust retirement accounts, and were able to not have to worry about whether it's a sturdy or bust or what happened to the economy. So I recommend that. Okay, so a little sideline there, but let's get back to our discussion on dealing with the government agencies. And we kind of left off kind of talking about the problem of the government agencies open this up to the general public and say, we'd like your input. Most people ignore it. They have no idea what's going on. They don't care. They're going on with their lives. And then suddenly it's announced that we're going to build this project on this site that's in a quarter mile of your house. And all of a sudden, some people get alarmed by it. Some people don't care still. But people that get alarmed are usually a minority of extremely loud people. And they go make a big ruckus, and then other people start thinking, well, maybe we should reconsider this because I've never heard about this, but it sounds like it's bad. And we get this whole problem where everybody shows up to a planning commission meeting with their boiling tar and their torches and their pitchforks, when the developers are just doing what the city and the community had asked them to do in the first place. There are some developers that try to push things on communities that are not what they want. Most developers don't do that. Why would you do that? It's too expensive. It's too much work. So let's talk about how do you engage with the local government? Because I don't think most people even know there is a planning commission or city council meeting, or if they do know, they don't know how to access it or that it's even available to them.
And I will say, so as my role as government affairs director, one of the things that I do with my membership is I encourage them to help me engage with staff ahead of time. So we might look at, we have two things, the things that are in process and things that we can see are going to become a problem down the road just because of what we're seeing happening. So let's take something like a short-term rental ordinance, which is all the rage right now. And you will find that in some cities, they're coming out with the ordinance and there's a very loud group of people who don't want it no matter what. And they're just off the charts upset. And then you have another group of people who are the people who own those properties. And for them, it's an income stream. And they've never had a problem. It's always been okay. And they don't really understand what's happening. And they don't know where to go to engage. And for us as an association, what we care about is that private property rights and private contract and the ability to do business is happening. That's sort of what we do at We Serve, is try to help all of our members, whether they're real estate agents and brokers or lenders or appraisers or someone who has a business doing gift baskets. How do you keep doing business within this area? So short-term rentals has suddenly become a problem for a lot of people, but they have no reason and they have no background. So the first thing you heard was, this is horrible and there's nothing but noise and crime. Except that in Arizona, we've been a short-term rental, commonly known as vacation rental communities and state, 420 years or more. Why is it upsetting today?
That is what it started as. It's Snowbird City. Yes.
Yes. So how come it's a problem today? And as I went through various cities, and I went through a lot of cities, some within our jurisdiction, some without, and said, tell me, police, how many calls on short-term rentals have you had in the last 2 years and what they are about? Some cities said they had none. Other cities said they had 1 or 2. And usually when they had a call, it was about noise.
Yeah, turn the music down. And so they do.
Yes, and you have an ordinance already about the noise, and sometimes they say it's the number of people. Well, you have ordinances about that too. You can't really cram 100 people into an 800 square foot house, right? Like, that's not a thing, whether you're a renter or an owner. So calling, and I would get calls from community members who would say, Liz, I know you're Association of Realtors, but can you help me because I have a short-term rental neighbor and there's a problem. Great. What's the problem? A lot of times it'd be noise. Okay. Did you call the police and report that? No. Why didn't you report it to the police? Because I don't want to be that guy. Okay. But the police don't know there's a noise problem unless you tell them there's a noise problem. And your job as a resident and citizen is to help them. If there's an ordinance that says that the noise is too loud, then your job, since you noticed it, is to let the authorities know so they can enforce that law. They can't possibly know unless you tell them. That's your job. Your responsibility as someone who lives in that neighborhood is to tell them so they can enforce that ordinance. If you choose not to do that, then is it really reasonable to take away your neighbor's ability to rent that, especially if you're talking about one instance, one time in what that particular person admitted? It was 3 years.
Well, I think this goes back to the
rational here.
We talked about earlier about discourse instead of emotional reaction. So my question also, before, when you call the police, did you call the owner and say, hey,
Yes.
did you know that these renters that are in here are making ruckus and we don't like it?
Yeah.
That owner will probably clamp down quickly because they
Yes.
don't want to risk losing something that is probably what they live on, is that cash flow.
Yes.
So they will clamp down quickly. And if it's been done through something like Airbnb, they can ding that renter on Airbnb who could lose their privileges on Airbnb.
Right.
So that corrects the thing. So I look at short-term rentals, especially in Phoenix area, as sort of a self-regulating industry. And here's why. I know people that do short-term rentals as their business, and they don't do it in Phoenix. And the reason is because there are almost no ordinances, and they say, so it's saturated. And so because of that, we're not doing them because there's so many and it's hard to get the prices. So will you get more of them? Not if it's not lucrative. Not if it's a bad risk for the investor. So it may regulate itself on the number. Secondly, again, as we said, through Airbnb, there's a self-regulation that the owners can do negative reviews on the renters if they have any problems. If the police get called, the neighbors are upset, and those renters then are out of the system for everywhere they want to rent. And so it kind of helps fix itself. And I wonder a lot of times if a lot of people that are upset about short-term rentals, they realize how much money people are making on the short-term rentals and a little bitter about them. That they should have bought 10 years ago the house next door instead of letting someone else buy it. And I say that as someone that's been in the development business, and I see a lot of the upset people. They claim higher causes, but the fact is they themselves are embittered because they missed the boat.
Well, and here's the thing, everyone thinks of short-term rentals as vacation only. That's a portion of it, but we go to our communities and we say, before you close off STRs, short-term rentals, let's talk about what your economy looks like. You have engineers at your local chip manufacturing plant who come in for a couple of weeks from out of country. They need a short-term rental. You have medical personnel who come in for specialty physical therapy in particular. Physical therapists are a lot of people we see, and then specialized traveling nurses are the other group we see in the medical community who come in for a few days or a few weeks to do that job. Education, how many visiting professors on a particular project that a university is working on or a college is working on, or a topic area where they want to have a particular 1 week saturation in a concentration area and they get the expert in. It's 1 week, it's 4 days, it's 3 weeks. And then you look at us and we have a huge population of veterans here, and we have a veterans facility. And so one of the things that happens, and it could be long-term problems like cancer or veterans who need physical therapy or other medical treatments, and they don't need to be in the hospital, but they need to go to the hospital almost every day. So they need to live their hospital. Well, you can get those people need a short-term rental for themselves in that case. I've got 2 or 3 more weeks to go. I don't want to stay in the hospital for 2 or 3 weeks. I don't need to. I'd rather be in a house, a condo, something like that. And flip side of that is when they become very ill or injured, their families need someplace to stay. And it's certainly more habitable and more comfortable for a family to come visit their loved one if they're in a condo, a townhouse, a home where they can go grocery shopping and have some semblance of a normal life while they're over at the hospital a lot. And people just recover better. People recover better when they're in those type of environments with their family, and if it's a more home-like environment. There are numerous other wage earning people contributing to our economy who need short-term rentals. And that has happened for a long time. Now you take the cities through the homeless advocates who are looking for a solution. And now a lot of cities and towns, particularly with HUD presenting a lot of money, have come in and they're buying the short-term hotels. So the hotels that would rent for you for a couple of days or a week or even a month, they're taking those and putting them. So we're helping that population, the homeless population, but now we've just unhoused another population. And when I say, and then what do we do for this population that you still have? You really do need those individual short-term rental people to accommodate those people who are still working in your environment.
Transitioning people. Let's stay on an Airbnb for a couple of months. Yeah. So we have to take another break. I got to take another break. When we come back, we're going to pick up this conversation and talk about how do we remove some of this emotional decision-making from the discourse. I'm talking to Liz Recchia. She is the Government Affairs Director for We Serve, which is the Association of Realtors in the Phoenix Metro and areas beyond that in Arizona. This is Building Solid Foundations on KCAA Radio. We'll be right back.
Fire Up Connect is the most innovative business networking group, supporting and collaborating with a dozen of small businesses that are interested in building and establishing strong business connections, hosting educational live seminars while carrying out business and community-driven projects, as well as marketing programs as a part of its membership program. Fire Up Connect also offers virtual assistance with a wide range of services including inbound customer support, chat support, appointment setting and email management, graphic designing, video editing, web design and development, social media marketing, e-commerce solution, content writing and much more. For more information, head on over to www.fireupconnect.com. Fire Up Connect, helping success stories unfold every day.
Tired of qualifying your leads and not getting the right clients for you? Join the finest women in real estate and learn how to attract the best clients and increase your referral network. Call now at 951-378-5316. 951-378-5316 and become one of the finest women in real estate.
Welcome back to Building Solid Foundations on KCAA Radio 1050 AM all over Southern California. Don't forget, if you miss us live, you can catch us on any of the rebroadcasts on the streaming platforms, Roku, Amazon Fire, or the Android on the Building Solid Foundations channel. Also, we're on your favorite podcast platform. We're in the KCAA archive, kcaaradio.com. And of course, we can always, you'll always be able to find us on YouTube on some of our, not everything's up there, but a lot of it is. Today, we're talking to Liz Recchia. She is the Government Affairs Director for eServe, which is Association of Realtors in the Phoenix and the greater Phoenix metro area, all over that section of Arizona. They're quite a large territory, actually. She also runs a real estate training and education school, and she is a seasoned real estate investor going back years. I won't say how many years because that, but well, I'll just say she's a few years older than me, and I'm no stranger. She's been doing this a long time, and she has a great amount of knowledge and expertise in this area. So we've been talking about the issues of dealing with local policy. We mentioned short-term rentals, but this touches on things like landscaping ordinances and the city. We mentioned in the earlier a reference to city creating a general plan where their future is going to be, the 10 to 20-year future of the city. And these things are open for people to discuss, although we tend to see most of the discussion happens by screaming and a lot of opinions at the point of implementation instead of back in the planning process. So let's talk about, we talked about you need to get involved early. So if I want to find out where these things are happening and what cities, because when we say Phoenix, that's a city, but there's what, 20 some odd municipalities out there at least.
There's several. In the West Valley, you're going to find the ones people recognize would be Buckeye, Glendale, Surprise, El Mirage, Peoria, and then there's other numerous smaller cities, Avondale and Goodyear, several smaller cities. And then in the East Valley, you're going to recognize Tempe and Mesa and Chandler and Gilbert.
Right. And then
those are the ones you probably recognize.
Right. And then down in the corner beyond the Indian reservations, there's the Coolidge and Eloy and Casa Grande.
Now, so you have Apache Junction and you have Casa Grande and Florence and Coolidge and Eloy. And the city of Maricopa in Pinal County too.
Right.
Yeah.
Maricopa is almost entirely surrounded by Indian reservation. Kind of sits a little island out there, but it's an incorporated city and it's had a lot of growth lately. But each and every one of those cities has its own separate government that is in charge of their own planning and zoning. Now there are some state and federal rules they have to follow, but the majority of those decisions are made by your local city council and the planning commission, which are people they appoint. And so if we want to get involved, how would I find out what the planning commission is talking about, what the city council is thinking about? How do I know these things?
So all of them will put out, most people go to the agendas for the week, for the next week's meeting, which is usually put out 3 business days prior to whatever that meeting is, but that may be a little late. I prefer to have eServe and our members give input before it ever gets to that point, early on in the process. So for instance, when a developer purchased a large amount of state land. So as a citizen in Arizona, you can see what state land is being purchased. You can see what other lands are being purchased by public record. It's at your county recorder. And so if you're interested in a particular area and you start seeing that land that you're interested changing hands, it's being sold, then you can anticipate that there's something going to happen there. It's whatever that is. So now you want to go and find out, well, who purchased that? And usually you can figure out from them what their business type is. In this case, a couple of years ago, we had 6,500 acres. This is just one instance of land being purchased out in what is now Apache Junction. It was unincorporated state land at the time. The developer bought it and said during the time period that they intended to ask Apache Junction to annex them, and Apache Junction did. Well, now what we know is that this is a home builder. It's a large swath of land. They're going to need some commercial things like grocery stores and gas stations and post offices and libraries and schools, as well as the homes that they intend to put there, because they were just adjacent to a very industrial area with lots of jobs coming in. So that part of the math made total sense. Bringing people in for a job and not having a house is a bad plan. So this was an opportunity to do that. Well, we went in at that point and we said, okay, Apache Junction, you haven't written any code. In fact, they had no code at all to address some of the proposed types of development that would happen because they'd always been very rural. people had horses and cattle and very rural places. They didn't even have a code of their ordinances to talk about it. So what do we know? What would we can be concerned about? Well, we would be concerned about a builder who came in and built a too narrow a street to have on-street parking and an emergency vehicle get down the street, which we have seen that happen. So we try to sell product on those types of houses that were built 40, 50 years ago in those type of neighborhoods. It's a hard sell because everyone looks at it and says, how am I supposed to get to and fro? And how's a fire truck supposed to get to my house? We looked at things and said, be careful, make sure that the driveways are long enough for the vehicles that are most commonly driven in your community. As you can imagine, that's a lot of trucks and not just the old fashioned smaller F-150s, but some larger trucks, larger SUVs. Well, a 10-foot driveway isn't going to work. You can't even get a minivan in a 10-foot driveway or Camry. So our suggestion was in the course of you writing the ordinances, the LDO, the land use development ordinance, make sure that you're considering what your population is going to need. And when you put in the ordinances, perhaps you look at things like this and say streets need to be a minimum X wide to accommodate what we know is going to happen. Maybe your driveways need to be a minimum of something that's more like 20 feet instead of 10 feet. And we have seen codes that said 10 feet, and that's just unrealistic. 20 feet is much more realistic for the type of vehicles, and maybe even bigger if you have a community that has longer vehicles. What do you need for a garage? Sometimes we get down to cities who allow, and this we have a community where they allowed the builder to build basically what is a car and a half garage and call it a 2-car. Okay, so that's the type of thing, okay, you need to do that. You also need to look at the community. Where do you need a grocery store? So as you're plotting this out and you have raw land, look at where are you planning to have your multifamily and your homes, and are they detached, and are they smaller, larger? How large are the houses? How large are the rentals? If you have, and look at your economic development department. They're bringing people in with jobs. Who are those people? And what type of housing needs and commercial amenities do they need? They probably do need gas stations. They probably do need grocery stores. How many grocery stores? Are you bringing in a population of people who might have no families as far as small children go, or people of age will be, their households are forming and they will probably have children and maybe even have more than one child? What does it look like for the rental and housing product? So you're accommodating these folks. And for us, the big message is we want to see a huge variety of housing. If you want people to be born in your community and live their life and then pass away in your community and in their old age have a place to live, then you need an entire arc of housing product. And so that's part of what we look into planning. And so that's some of the input we give as they're looking at new places to build on raw land that's never been built, or if they're looking at updating something like a downtown area, some of our older downtowns. Who's the population you need to serve today? And then what are your projections for what that population needs in 50 years? Because that becomes part of your long-term planning. We may not be able to have a particular commercial need today in that location, but if we're planning for it, maybe in 5 or 7 years that will be there. And it's all about making sure you're serving that community, not just today, but long term. So we tend to get involved and we just write a letter. Here's what we're seeing. Here's our concerns. Here's our ideas. Here's our suggestions for considerations in your planning. That helps. And anybody can do that. Anybody can write to their city staff and say, here's what I'm concerned about. Here's my suggestions. Here's my ideas.
Okay. And then they can address what people's fears when it comes to development tend to be. What about the traffic? What about overcrowding in the schools? What about noise? Right? All these different things that they come up with. What about all the dust and disruption from the construction? Well, you're right. If you address those things up front, those solutions can be talked about ahead of time, put into codes, and then those become part of the conditions that a developer and builder need to follow in order to make sure that they're mitigating those impacts that they have. And also it goes to even as simple as what are the hours of construction.
Mm-hmm.
Now, obviously in Arizona, they want to start as soon as the sun peaks up over the hill because it's hot in the late day.
It's brutally hot.
But if you're a person that works late and you want to sleep till 9 o'clock in the morning, that's a problem. So you have to discuss those things. What does that look like? How much disruption is there? How close is it to you? So you're right. You got to address these things up front, but from a very rational standpoint, as opposed to wait for 2 or 3, 4 years and everything's building, and all of a sudden we don't like something going in. And we had the right to say something in a hearing where we were listening to the public 3 years ago. And now we're trying to change, we're trying to go back and change something that should have been addressed way back when. And that's when the emotional stuff comes out, because I think people feel at that point it's already been decided I'm a little helpless, so all I could do is scream and yell and try to get a lot of attention.
And if something's being proposed, and we've had this happen more than once, but I'll give you one example. There was a city where at a hard corner, it had been originally zoned for gas station. It was now going to be multifamily, multiple stories, something like 8 stories. It didn't have the parking around it needed for that population of people. And at that hard corner, you already had traffic problems where you'd sit through 3 to 4 lights to get through the intersection. So people were upset. But when you sat down and talked to them, what they were upset about is that made no sense for that location. If you move that project down a half a mile onto another hard corner that was in the process of being planned and the process of infrastructure being laid, they were much calmer about it, because now you had the parking facilities on property. You had the ability to accommodate the water and sewer and electricity power needs that were going to be required for that. And it was in the process of being built, that area. So now you can accommodate increased traffic. You can widen the road. You can make it a right turn only lane from the facility out onto the street. You can do a lot of things to accommodate what you know is going to be a busy place.
And you've articulated what needs to be done, as opposed to standing with a sign and yelling and screaming, which doesn't get anywhere. You actually have articulated the position and why it makes more sense to consider these things. We're going to take another break. We're going to come back and wrap the show up right here on Building Solid Foundations with Liz Recchia, Government Affairs Director of We Serve and owner of We Sell Real Estate. I'm your host, Steve Matley. We'll be right back after this show.
This is Steve Matley. Join me every Thursday at 3 p.m. right here on KCAA for Building Solid Foundations radio talk show. I spent decades as a professional construction manager, business owner, real estate developer, and a college educator, and I enjoy learning new things from other people. We talk a lot about real estate, business, and finance, but we cover a diverse range of other topics as well. Some of the topics we've discussed in the past few months include real estate investing, leadership, higher education, ADUs, marketing using technology, multifamily rental properties, business strategy, entrepreneurship. You never know who may show up or what they may talk about, so join us right here on KCAA for Building Solid Foundations Radio.
Hey guys, it's Damon, Mr. Foxy, Damon Hart, and I'm here with the real men of real estate. And I just want to say, hey, come and watch us this Sunday, 1 p.m. live, every Sunday. Okay, we're going to be on KCAA Radio, 1050 AM, 106.5 FM. If you got a minute, just tune in. We can't wait to have you here. I'm going to be there. If you can't make it on there, we're going to be at Roku TV, Amazon Fire TV, or Android app on Building Solid Foundations channel. So tune in. But you know what you got to do in the meantime. Keep it foxy.
Fire Up Connect is the most innovative business networking group, supporting and collaborating with a dozen of small businesses that are interested in building and establishing strong business connections, hosting educational live seminars while carrying out business and community-driven projects, as well as marketing programs as a part of its membership program. Fire Up Connect also offers virtual assistance with a wide range of services including inbound customer support, chat support, appointment setting and email management, graphic designing, video editing, web design and development, social media marketing, e-commerce solution, content writing and much more. For more information, head on over to www.fireupconnect.com. Fire Up Connect, helping success stories unfold every day.
Welcome back to Building Solid Foundations. I'm Steve Matley, your host. We are talking with Liz Recchia. She is the Government Affairs Director for We Serve, which is the Association of Realtors all over the Phoenix area, including most of Maricopa and Pinal counties and areas beyond. We've been talking about ordinances, rules around development, getting involved, trying to keep emotion out of the discussion, and keeping logical and beneficial discourse as our course of action. So as we move along, you mentioned a couple of things in the last one that triggered a few things. I mean, one is when we talk about land use, if you want to know where some good considerations that you're thinking, I know there's things wrong with this, but I'm not sure exactly. The ULI, Urban Land Institute, has a lot of good just ideas and parameters around smart development that may or may not fit your area. You pick kind of what works in your area. And you look also at your local economic development department and find out what are they doing, because they will post up there that they're bringing in these companies. New tech companies got 2,000 jobs coming in. A new manufacturing facilities got 5,000 jobs coming in, and you'll know what's coming into your area, and you can help start addressing that. And they'll also announce major land purchases. They'll probably announce because they'll be proud of it. They worked long and hard to get that done. So let's get into OMB, Office of Management and Budget, and the issues that around that surround that in relation to land use and good policy making.
So this is an issue that we are looking at, and we're trying to outreach not just to our members, but to other organizations, other professions in the real estate industry who will be affected, as well as our cities and towns who will definitely be affected. And OMB is the Office of Management and Budget. And when the Congress passed and the president signed the huge infrastructure bill, part of that infrastructure bill was the Build America, Buy America. And it says that if we're going to build infrastructure, we're going to go ahead and use 100% American made, which sounds great. And I think probably most Americans are on board with that. Our problem is that since the 1990s, America has been dismantling its manufacturing base. So right now, we a lot of the raw materials, although it sits in our ground, we don't have the ability to mine it out because of policy, political, governmental policy. And if you can get it out, there's all sorts of restrictions and permits and issues with trying to get something done. But in the meantime, things in America have lessened. So for instance, if you need copper, we only have two open copper smelters right now. There's a third one in Utah, but it's over capacity and has been for a while. But there's two, one in Texas and one here in Arizona by Superior in Pinal County. Well, they're over capacity now. So if you're looking forward, you're saying we need to build this infrastructure and we need copper now, it's going to be a while. And if you get this federal money, and what's happening is all the federal agencies have money through this program. You can be building water treatment plants, or you could be building roadways, or you could be building and enhancing broadband. You could be doing water infrastructure. If you have a place where growth is happening and you need to get water there, water infrastructure and housing, that's all part of infrastructure. Basically, anything you need to function is going to be part of infrastructure. So the money is coming out of lots of different agencies for these projects. And that's all fine and good, except that when then the backside of that, the actual rules and implementation say you can only use 100% American, and we don't make it, that's a problem. So one of the examples, I wrote a blog post on this, and one of the examples I pulled out is for broadband. We don't make any of the stuff we need for broadband. So 100% of it is foreign. So in this case, the Middle Mile Project was a grant program, and lots of our rural communities here, Pinal, Cochise, Santa Cruz, are in our territory, and they particularly were very active, but all the rural parts of Arizona, they were very active last fall in trying to get their broadband projects, grant funds through this Middle Mile Project. And a lot of them were rewarded it. So now it's time for them to go get the infrastructure built. We're 6 months after the award, so now the plans have been finalized, they're ready to go. Well, the problem is, of course, that from the raw material on, none of it is American made, and yet the grant, the new rules from OMB say that grant money can only be used on 100% American made. So the Commerce Department came out with a clause that said, well, we will waive that requirement for 1 year. The paragraph ahead of that in their guidance was, we acknowledge that none of this is being made or can be made because we don't even have the facilities for them to make it. First, we have to build the facilities for these products to be made here in America. So we estimate that will take 3 to 5 years. But they issued a 1-year waiver. That doesn't make sense.
So it makes it impossible.
Yeah.
And so
we have to be aware of that.
I've worked on government projects like that where things were supposed to be made in America, where nothing was made here, doing retrofits and those kind of things, and especially fire life safety stuff. They don't make. They can assemble some of it here, but they don't make it here, and it becomes a problem. So that's something that there's a federal law that is now going to affect local, because we're relying on that grant money to make it feasible. And so the federal government says we provided all this money to solve these problems, but they've also put the roadblock up and say you can't actually access any of the money to solve the problem unless you follow rules that are impossible to follow.
Right.
And we see this a lot when laws are made. There's the old saying, two things you don't want to know how they're made is laws and sausages. And yeah, because and again, was it a bad idea to put that in there? Well, philosophically, no. Was it a bad idea from a logistic standpoint? Yes, because it's an impossible thing. Maybe what that means is they need to have another law that says, before we do this, there's a law we're putting in to expedite and facilitate the regeneration of manufacturing in the USA to create these things here, if that's possible, which then may fly in the face of, say, environmental regulations. So there's all these things that come in, and I should tell people, you can be as much of an advocate as you want for something, but go find out what the dominoes behind yours are as you knock it down. And you may find out that you're in favor of these three things, and all three are conflicting agendas. For example, the AIA has their thing about it. They want sustainability and green building, but they also want affordable housing.
Right.
Those don't
Right.
work together. They do not.
No.
And you can find an isolated incident. Well, yes, in this case, they do if we do solar panels. Okay, but that's one thing. But overall, all those policies prevent affordable housing.
We actually had a local government who wanted to do the whole greenhouse thing. And they went to chart it out and they were going to build it. And by the time they got through with everything that was required, that house was going to cost $500,000.
Yeah.
That's not affordable for
to build. Yeah, exactly. So we got to wrap up our conversation. We're talking to Liz Recchia. She is the Government Affairs Director for We Serve, which is Association of Realtors in the Phoenix area in Arizona and a much larger area than that. She also runs We Sell Real Estate, which is a real estate training and education school. You can contact her at lizrecchia.com, LIZRECCHIA, lizrecchia.com, or LR@lizrecchia.com is where her email is. So check her website, check her email, and also go on Amazon. Check out that book, Help, I Can't Make My House Payment, for some real simple, easy to implement steps to not just, you don't have to be distressed trying to make your house payment, just good money management and the ability to be able to have money to invest and do better. So thank you, Liz, for being on Building Solid Foundations. We're here every week on KCAA 1050 AM and 106.5 FM all over Southern California. Don't forget to catch us on the streaming apps on Roku, Amazon Fire, and Android if you miss our live. And until next week, go do something different this week.